welcome back to the American Adversaries radio show. That's right, folks. You got us for our 3-hour Sunday evening classic tour. I am Christopher Hart, joined in the studio tonight by Carl Jackson, Johnny Guns, Ben, Lucas Paris, and Jeff Sinnott. You can be a part of the show, too. 407-774-8255 is the number as we come to you live from the Mercury Free Broadcasting Studios. Don't forget, get that mercury, that so-called silver fillings, out of your head. Call my dentist, Dr. James E. Hardy, at 407-678-3399. Get his book, Mercury Free, and it'll tell you why you need to get rid of that stuff. You got chronic pains out there. You got chronic things that the doctors keep giving you drugs for, but it doesn't do anything for. Look in your mouth. If you got one of those silver fillings or more, maybe that's your problem. All right. 407-774-8255 is the number if you want to join Johnny and dispute and argue with me as to why the NASCAR has become a communist sport. Then go ahead and give us a call. But I think that's why they're losing their fan base. It has nothing to do with the Confederate flag, but we'll see. So you said there was one other thing you wanted to take issue with.
Yeah, basically making NASCAR all the same by making the engines the same, and I would say that the good thing about that is that races are now determined more on strategy and driver ability. I've watched plenty of NASCAR races. Thank you, Tori, my sister, for that, and you do end up seeing a lot more strategy as far as pit strategy when they come in, and that does go a long way in determining how races are determined. But also, the second thing I wanted to bring up is if you're going to talk about that is the reason that NASCAR is becoming a communist sport, then you have to take an issue with Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, and every other sport that has a salary cap. Because it's the same thing. The commissioner of the league initiates a salary cap so that all teams have to play under that salary cap. And in an effort to try and balance out...
First of all, no, they don't play under the salary cap. They can go over the salary cap.
They can, but what happens?
They get penalized.
They get hit with penalties.
But guess who does that?
Los Angeles Dodgers.
And the New York Yankees.
Rich teams, yeah.
Right. So really it does nothing. It does nothing
That goes into having weak commissioners.
And I disagree. When it comes to football, for instance, you can have differently inflated footballs. No.
Why you got to keep going back to that game against the Colts? Huh?
No, I think that NASCAR has in their efforts to make the sport more competitive, I think it has backfired on them. I don't think that it is what the fans are looking for. I think the fans are looking for something more than driver skill. I think they're looking for the team skill, for the skill of the mechanics and the engine builders, the things that used to happen in NASCAR that don't happen anymore. Richard Petty dominated the sports for a couple of decades.
Sure.
And the sport grew all that time.
Sure.
It grew. It got more popular. You want to talk about strategy? You go back and watch some of those races that he ran against David Pearson and Cale Yarborough. You saw some great strategy in those races. Mm-hmm. You saw sometimes cars coming from 2 laps down to win the race in the final laps of the race because the front-running car, his engine blew. Mm-hmm. All right, all of the drama really has been taken out of it. They get in these trains that just go woo, 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 like a dog on a roller coaster or something, and you're just waiting for the wreck. That's not auto racing. Auto racing, once again, stock car racing means that you and I should be able to go down and buy one of these cars off the showroom floor.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
all right, that's what it was all about. And then they would take those cars and modify them for racing. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest parts of the Apopka culture during the 50s, 60s, and 70s was you would come up here and you'd go down almost any street in Apopka and you would see race cars. Sure. Where the guys were out there tinkering with them and building on them and stuff like that.
Street races.
All that's gone.
Fast and the Furious.
That is gone. Because it has all been, the racing has been all taken out of the hands of the people who build the cars.
Do you think that...
Or used to, anyway.
Do you think that modernity and social media could play a role in this as well? People, and the lack of American exceptionalism, the attitude. Because when I think of NASCAR, I think of people that love America. I think of this, American-made, if you will, idea and type sport. And I wonder, too, if we have a society now that's a little too Americana, maybe, that's a little too white Americana, quote-unquote, maybe. Social media, it's not fast enough for social media. It's the same thing that's happening with, I know this sounds weird, but I promise I'll relate this.
Okay.
I read a story last week where people are becoming like fashion designers are starting to lose a lot of money because social media has made it where stars like the Kardashians or whomever, rappers, will post pictures of themselves in clothing one week and then the next week in another. So things go in and out of fashion so fast now because of social media, they're losing money.
I don't think it has to do with NASCAR. I understand where you're going with that. But I think NASCAR's problems are it is not NASCAR anymore. It is not stock car racing anymore. You know, stock car racing started out during the era of Prohibition, right?
Right.
Because they would build these cars and trucks to go faster than the police car. So it all was sort of the American, you talked about Americana, NASCAR was Americana. It was the small guy building an engine that could go faster than the big guy. It was the small guy outdoing the big guy. There are no small guys in NASCAR anymore. It's all these huge race teams. There are no rivalries because the rivalries are fleeting. Once again, there's very little for the fan to really, in my opinion, to really grab hold of. And then you got all these young bucks that keep coming up, and it's like the Backstreet Boys in NASCAR. And it's hard. It's hard for fans.
Great current reference.
And it's hard, I believe, for fans to really develop loyalties the way they used to. And then you have sponsors who are totally scared and totally, whipped by political correctness, who will turn and walk away from these cars at the drop of a hat. By the way, the Sprint Cup Series is going to change its name after next year. Sprint Mobile, or Sprint, whatever they're called now, is not going to renew their contract.
So what I've gotten out of this entire argument is that Jeff Gordon made NASCAR famous, and Richard Petty won because his hat was scary. That's all I really got out of this entire thing.
And Richard Petty what?
He won because his hat was very scary.
Speaking of Jeff Gordon, when he first came up, he was kind of like, in the old NASCAR era, right? Where he was, you talk about skilled driver.
He was bringing in he ushered in the next generation.
The next generation of race car drivers.
But
it was still the old NASCAR, where you could have a crew chief and a mechanic that could outbuild everybody else. And that's why he had the fastest cars. That's why Bill Elliott had the fastest cars, because Bill Elliott's brother built those engines for his car, and he had better know-how than anybody else, and they could aerodynamic that car better than anybody else. And back then, when you looked at a Ford on the track, you knew it was a Ford. When you looked at a Chevrolet, it was an Impala, you knew it was an Impala. You look at those cars today, and I guarantee you, if it doesn't say on it what it is, or if you don't know that racing team, I guarantee you will not know who was supposedly manufactured that car.
Yeah,
the Toyotas aren't Toyotas, the Fords aren't Fords, the Chevys aren't Chevys.
Right,
because they're communized.
Just by looking at them, they're all the same. It's the engines underneath that are different by Toyota and Chevy.
The engines underneath come from about 2 or 3 manufacturers, and they're not Toyota, they're not Chevy, they're not Ford. The manufacturers pulled out of auto racing a long time ago. These engines are made, many of them are made by the Hendrick Motor Team, and there's 2 or 3 teams that make the engines for all the doggone cars. It's a doggone communist sport. It's not NASCAR the way NASCAR came up to be. That's why they're losing their fan base. Has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. Hispanics don't care about those cars because they're not cars that they can go and work on in their driveway.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
That is a very true sentiment. That's why I said earlier, if NASCAR were to adapt, have the quote-unquote stock car racing, even if they're not stock, but you go to different venues and areas, and for instance, Puerto Ricans out here like what they call Euro-style cars. Doesn't mean BMWs. It doesn't mean Mercedes-Benz. It means they like the style like Subarus or Hondas, fixing them up and all this kind of stuff. If you see that type of stuff grow, then you'll grow a new fan base. You just will. You go to California, and people used to ride.
Go ahead. Finish your
people
point.
used to ride VW Bugs and race VW Bugs. Believe it or not, they would hook up. It sounds crazy, but they would hook them up, and those cars would be so fast. It was ridiculous.
All right. Let's go to Diane. She's been holding it a long time. Diane, thanks for calling. Diane.
Chris, you are correct.
Why
Have you ever tried to buy a ticket anymore? My mother stopped buying my brother's tickets to NASCAR about 10 years ago because she couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And I grew up in upstate New York, and the dirt tracks have it going on because those are true stock cars. I know many people that have built them and are still racing today.
Yeah.
And they've got a serious fan base.
Yeah, they've just taken all the fun out of racing. They've made it impossible. If you're not in the NASCAR network, they've made it impossible for you to come up and be part of auto racing today. It's become a monopolized sport. They've locked everybody out, in essence, and made it a communist sport. I'm just sorry. You know, when everything is made to be the same, and all the only difference is the driver and a few decisions made on pit road, that's not in the true spirit, shall we say, of stock car racing.
That's exactly right. And that dirt track right there in New Smyrna does a bang-up job.
You're right. You're right. And that's because anybody can go over there and race, and if you're a better mechanic and you whip everybody all season long, the people still come out because they want to see if you're still going to be able to do it. It's just a whole different kind of racing than what they're peddling today.
I'm unfamiliar with the dirt track in New Smyrna. What exactly?
Well, actually, it's a dirt. They have a dirt track and an asphalt track over there, and it's right over there, I believe, on 44, isn't it, Diane? As you go into New Smyrna, yeah,
right there on the corner,
right off before, yeah. And they've been racing there a long time. Sometimes when it used to be, you know, Tony Stewart was kind of the last one probably to do this now since that guy got killed last year. But you know, the NASCAR racers used to go down there when they were in town, and they'd either just be watching the races at New Smyrna, or they might participate in the races. But
one of the reasons Tony Stewart liked to do it.
Yeah, but the sport has become corporatized, it's become monopolized, and I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, it's become socialized slash communized. But
well, North Carolina's got it going on. My brother goes up there twice a year to the dirt tracks. He won't even touch NASCAR anymore. That's
what I mean. They're losing their fan base because they're losing their identity, what made them strong in the first place.
And Diane, the reasoning you say it is exactly for the reasons that Chris stated. They're not stock cars. They're not.
That's exactly right. You can't. It's like having I used to love volleyball players, and your volleyball player leaves. You don't have anybody to root for.
Yeah.
You know, And your show yesterday, I listened to it twice. It was amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
He is, isn't he? All right. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate you being out there. Johnny, I'll give you the last word because we got to move on after this break.
I will say the reason NASCAR is losing fans is I think they're losing the older fans like you, because if you go out on the street...
You're trying to say they're dying?
Don't make me throw something at you. No, what I'm saying is if you go out, you're giving NASCAR, I think, fans today a little bit too much credit. If you go ask 10 NASCAR fans right now just off the street, then I don't think that you will find 5 of them that say it ain't like it used to be 30 or 40 years ago. I think right now the problem that you're going to find with people with stock car driving is that you don't have the dynamic personality that are bringing people into the sport. I will admit, I'm a Mets fan, but there are times, yeah, really? I know, stop laughing. But there are reasons that
you know,